just get that going. And we're all set. So again, thank you guys so much for joining in today and being here. It means a lot to me that people care enough to step through things. So let's see what we can get done here today. So just to give you guys a sense of some of the background that went into this, because I know it's really tough to communicate. I felt a little bit like I wrote a very long blog post, but at the end of the day, we were just sort of dropping a lot of stuff in people's laps. So let's see if we can get some more context out there. So where we've been is a big part of where we're coming out with this plan for the year. So, I think there's a few things that we keep in mind when we were putting the plan together. First is that the association itself is still a pretty new organization, just a few years old. And we're really, I think, formed around, and again, this is my understanding because obviously I wasn't there. So I'm inheriting a lot of this knowledge, and it's good to have a conversation about it. But, I think we're really formed to address two really particularly sort of what felt like dire needs in the community. And one was to just sort of address con management and in particular, take the fiscal responsibility for those cons off of the plates of the community, because that is a ton of responsibility, to make sure that cons could keep going in that way. And really helping to support the Drupal.org infrastructure in particular, and making sure that there was a steady home there for Drupal.org. So it was really formed around these narrow needs, but the mission is obviously a lot broader than that. And so I think we're in this, particular phase where it's a really interesting time in that the community and the association are trying to come to terms with what is the role of the association in the community in this context where we are right now. And the association itself is really trying to also, grow up as an organization and put more management pieces in place internally, define things more clearly, so I think everyone's looking for definitions right now in a space that's a little bit ill-defined. So, that's really sort of where we're at. We feel like we're at right now. So internally, really trying to understand and manage our work better, but really listen to the community and figure out what is it that we need to do next as we sort of grow into the full realization of the mission, and have that be as much as possible, a community conversation. I think the caveat there for me is that the community is, the words "the community," those are tough words because there isn't a community. Definitely feels like the reality is that we have a lot of different pieces of the puzzle in our community. You guys are from all over the world, with all sorts of connections to the Drupal project itself. And so we have all these different perspectives on what the association should be and what it should be doing. And it is a real challenge to try to manage the differing opinions there. We have people that just to give you, an example, a really tactical example, on any given con survey, we can find out that 50% of the people loved the food and 50% of the people hated the food, right? So, that's just a small example, but these are the kinds of things that we bump into every day, every time we do anything over here at the association. So it's a bit of a challenge to manage what the community means. And we're really trying to figure out how to navigate that challenge and ask questions in a way that helps us come up with a direction that we know not everyone's going to agree with, but that everyone can understand why we made the choice we made, and they can all agree to live with it, if that makes sense. So that's, sort of feel like the context that we're operating in right now. And what are we hearing from the community? A few things that I think are some common themes. The first is that we have to fix the transparency and accountability of the association and do more of those things. So, I've been working really hard to make sure that when choices are made, we have a process a process of getting community input and then sharing what we heard and then making a choice and talking about what the choice is, and then being really open to hearing criticism or questions about those choices and try to answer things, and just be out there in the community more talking about what we're doing. And for us, that's what transparency is about putting the conversation out there, not just putting board meeting notes up, but really making everything as much of a conversation as we possibly can. That's really been our goal. I think a lot of the feedback I get about that contains the word transparency can sometimes sound more like people are looking for they're not necessarily upset that it's not transparent enough, but they're upset with the decision that was made. And so I'm trying to really help us set an expectation of what transparency will be from the DA. And the other bit is accountability. So, telling you what we're going to do and then showing you how well we performed on that is another piece that we're really trying to get into. We're really trying to make happen here. So transparency and accountability, we heard a ton from the community about that. Fixing Drupal.org, and I think that the answer to fixing Drupal.org is as diverse as the community itself. We hear all kinds of things that are broken with Drupal.org all over the place. And then this message, particularly from the board, our board, doing more and really living out the rest of our mission. And I think, Yost, I've heard you talk about this too, right? Like not just making Drupal.org out there, but I think I heard this more from Bert, I think, but making sure that we're out there getting Drupal out in front of different audiences and making sure that people know about the project and are using Drupal. So those are the
that was Bert, by the way. Yeah,
that was Bert. Yep.
And I really liked your reply to most, if not all, but most of the questions. So I mean, kudos for that one, Holly.
Thanks, Yost. Appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, this is what we've heard in the community, what people want to see more of from the DA. And I mean, there's a longer list than this, but this is the stuff that came up, almost universally from folks. So these are things that we thought about when putting the plan together too. So what's in the plan? I just want to be clear that there's three things to look at. There's the leadership plan itself, which is a narrative about what we're going to do in the year. There's the budget, which is the numerical representation of that narrative. And then there's a budget narrative that just sort of explains things in the budget, because the budget's full of acronyms and how does it work and why does it do that. So the budget narrative just helps us understand what's happening in that budget a little bit more. So there are three things to look at. And all together, they sort of put together a picture for the year and sort of set the tone for what we're doing and the context for the work. So what are we trying to say in that plan this year? I think there's three key points. There's probably like 8, but I'm going to focus on 3, and then we can get into the specifics. First, that we are really trying to answer that question about transparency and accountability in a new way. So the leadership plan itself is a document that is supposed to put accountability out into the community. So for the first time, we're trying to say, these are things that we're trying to do, and here are some metrics that will at least give us an indication of whether or not we are meeting that goal. And we're going to put those out there. We're going to build a dashboard around it. Those dashboards will be available publicly, right? So it's both transparent and, provides accountability as well. We're trying to address key community concerns with this plan, particularly around Drupal.org. And so you'll see, that's really the emphasis in 2014 is helping to make Drupal.org a better tool for the community. And then the other thing that I think is a theme of these documents is, maturing the organization and getting more management practice into the organization for ourselves and stuff that translates out into the community. So I think we see that developing metrics isn't only a way of developing goals, and the metrics that support them isn't just about transparency and accountability, but it's about creating internal systems that manage our work and make us a stronger organization as well. And just the way we present financials, all of that is part of maturing the association and taking us to that next sort of organizational development phase. So those are some key points from my perspective for the plans. So we should go look at some specifics if that sounds good to everyone. But any questions about that before we go take a look at the plan itself?
Nope, not for me.
Okay. So far it sounds good.
All right, thanks. And hey, Ruby, I see you joined. I will go ahead and I'm going to unmute you as well, so you can just pop a question in whenever you have one.
Hey, thanks.
Good. All right. So let's take a look at specifics. All right. So the leadership plan itself, some background from where, so let's start at the top with a summary. In the summary, there's a section, grow Drupal from 3 to 10%, Drupal associations of the heart of strong Drupal community. We exemplify a well-run organization, and under there's 5 bullet points. So where the context for where these things came from as objectives, because I realize it sounds like it's somewhat new to see some of these things. So the board met together in November of 2012. You can note those 5 elements all come from board objectives that were set in that November meeting. That was right before I was hired, and they met and talked about what does the DA need to focus on to be a successful organization. And these were 5 sort of shorter term, like year to 2 year objectives that the board set. The association overall does not have a strategic plan or a vision. We have a mission, right? Support the Drupal project. And we articulate a little bit about how we achieve that mission through the cons and other global events, through supporting the infrastructure for Drupal.org and representing the project legally, those sorts of things. But we don't have any sort of strategic plan, some stuff that looks multiple years out and talks about where we need to get to support that mission very well. So the board objectives were sort of the first sort of tactical stab in the ground at that, or stake in the ground, right? Like in a couple of years, you guys need to do these things if you're going to continue to exist as an organization. And so the 3 bullet points above those were our first stab internally at trying to put some longer term vision on the table. Growing Drupal to 10% of the web. By when? I don't know yet. But we want to start to figure out how to put some bigger picture objectives on the table to provide some more context for the work that we do. Ultimately, what needs to happen is that we need to do some strategic planning here at the organization, but we don't have that yet, but we're really trying to work towards that thinking, and that's where these bullet points come from. So they're open-ended, but yeah, I mean, basically what we want to do is make sure that Drupal is adopted very broadly. We want to make sure that the association is, operating as part of the community and not outside of the community or as an adjunct to the community, but, as part of the community, and that we are, running ourselves well. And we've got, good financials to support the project and a staff that's really happy to be here and do the work they're doing. So little background on those things. So we are then moving on into the imperatives. So very short term, what do we need to do in the next year to try to move the needle on those longer term bullet points? We want to look at 2 particular things that we think are really key. So if we're going to grow Drupal adoption and we're going to make the DA part, a more integral part of the community and be a well-run organization, there's 2 things we have to focus on. The first in 2014 is Drupal.org and really making that tool shine. And then the second is creating a successful Drupal 8 launch. And the reason we think those are so important, Drupal.org obviously is the sort of centerpiece of the community. It is where everyone meets from all around the world all the time and hashes out all the solutions to all the problems, right? And so we want to make sure that that tool really works for people, that you're able to do the work you need to do on Drupal.org. We also want to make sure that Drupal.org is representative of the other audiences that are coming in. So the folks who are trying to look at Drupal and say, is this the right tool for me, for example? For folks who are maybe already using Drupal, they're site builders or even content editors kind of folks using Drupal, but need some extra resources to take Drupal to their use of Drupal to the next stage. That's we want to make sure that those folks can all find what they need on Drupal.org as well. But in 2014, we really want to focus on making Drupal a better tool for folks. We also feel like if we can do this well and we do it in a way where we're not just making changes, but we're making changes with the community, with your feedback and with your input, then that also helps us towards that goal of being an integral part of the community, right? So if we're all in it together, and that's the way we run the changes that happen on Drupal.org, then we advance that goal as well. And then to do this work, we are going to have to increase, we feel like the approach is that we're going to have to increase our staff, and we're going to have to build some better internal systems to support that growth as well. So we feel like it really helps us get at those three main longer term areas outlined above. And then the Drupal 8 launch, it's a big release, and we really want to make sure it succeeds, and as well as Drupal 7 did or better. And so again, we really feel like focusing here helps us get at really all three goals. It obviously helps us grow Drupal if the launch is really good. This is something we have to do within the community, and so it helps us there. And again, it's helping us build internal systems that we're going to be able to use in other ways as well. So it strengthens the organization too. Those are imperatives. So big picture, which I know is a little bit ill-defined, but we're aware of that. And then what we feel like we need to focus on in 2014. Any questions about that?
Nope.
All right.
Although I have some very interesting points regarding the Drupal 8 launch, but you already know that.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. So how are we going to do that work? What are we going to, how's the DA going to be able to tackle this work this year? Not tactically, but strategically, what's the frame we're going to use to try to tackle these imperatives? A couple of things. One, the association itself, we need to do good work, but we also are looking for a little polish around here. So, we have just, for example, the association website. I don't know if you tried to find any 990s from past years, but good luck with that. We have some polishing that we need to do on our own stuff to make sure that people can, recognize find the work that we're doing, so that it feels like you're dealing with professionals who know what they're doing. So we've got that kind of work that we need to do so that we can all operate with some confidence about what we're doing. And more community, that's just going to be really huge. Figuring out how to integrate the community into everything we're doing, and to show the community that we are doing this stuff together is going to be really huge. And so my shorthand for this is more names on our site, which actually, if anyone's ever read the book Made to Stick, sort of a concept I stole from there, which is really about, it's a guy who owned a small town newspaper. Newspapers are folding all over the country. Why is his newspaper still successful? His newspaper is successful because the community can find themselves in the paper every day. And that's how I want things to be here at the DA. We do a ton of work with the community every day, but we're not really always exposing those stories and exposing that work in the right way. So I want to get really a lot better at communicating that, so that people can see that, and that people also then will see that work and then recognize also ways that they can get engaged. And so I think it'll be a multiplier effect for us. So work, really taking a community-based approach to all the work that we do, and operating very professionally in all that work as well, which, is a tall order, but that's our strategy. And then normally in any plan, we would also sort of, one piece of context we would have is what are the values that we're operating from, so that when we're making decisions, we are making those decisions with with the right, when you're making a tough decision, coming back to your values is often a very good uh, way to help sort of tilt the scale in one favor or the other. And I normally I find them a very important part. Well, I always find them a very important part of decision making. The association does not have any defined set of values at this moment in time, although we've just begun work on that. So hopefully we'll solve that problem shortly. I think we have a bunch of assumed values, but it'll be very good to get those articulated, and make sure that they obviously align with community values, so that we can use those as a way to help make decisions in the future as well. So normally we would outline those here, as part of the context as well. Then we outline our mission. So now we know sort of what the bigger picture looks like, or starting to look like for us. We're still defining it. What our imperatives are for the next year, what we need to focus on, how we want to do that work. And then we get into, all right, well, how will we know we're succeeding, right? So we've got 3 things we're really focused on doing. What are the objectives that are going to tell us we're succeeding? So then we get into the part of the plan that focuses on the metrics. And normally what I would present to you folks every year, it would be you'd always see things in sort of a scale. So we'd have the year coming up and what we're proposing, along with a couple years prior and a couple years in the future. So you get a sense of what the direction of those metrics has been and will be. And we are, one thing I want to emphasize here is this is our first time really trying to put goals like this out here in the community. And so we had a tough time even finding a lot of numbers, let alone predicting what they should look like or for the next 3 years. So we did not put anything down for 15 or 16, while we take this year to really understand what the numbers are and what they mean. And I suspect that when we put out the next annual plan, we'll be able to see a couple years into the future, as well as we probably will change some of these metrics over time. But right now, these are the ones that the board and staff felt like are going to give us our best insight into some of these objectives. So before I dive into those, I just want to stop one more time. Any questions from the community?
Not so much questions, but I did make some notes maybe for in the end or so to
I have a few
discuss.
statements of excitement as well. There's certain questions.
There you go.
I will take statements of excitement. That works.
I can throw that out there now. I was going to wait until the end, but basically, from my perspective, everything that I've read about, what's being proposed, the new staff that's being brought on, the refocusing on the Drupal.org infrastructure, those are all timely issues that have needed to be addressed. And I think that what the DA is seeing is that they're in the same position as a lot of other small enterprises and Drupal shops out there. They're all facing the same types of challenges. So I think that as the DA solves these issues, it puts the DA in a unique position to be a role model, particularly in the DevOps space. And it excites me to no end that the DA has this opportunity in front of it, and I just want to impart that I really hope that that opportunity is realized and communicated to the community properly so that people can learn from it.
That's a really great point. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, our intention is to document and share as much as possible. And I know that we are not, I hope that everyone on the call has seen that has been that is the velocity, right, that we're trying to bring to this, is to move into that direction of sharing as much as possible. And I know we're not always 100% successful, but that's definitely the intent. Yost, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, Yeah, one thing I can bring now is a little bit of thing. You mentioned earlier that you are looking at one of the things that you're looking at is how to integrate community into the work that we do, as you mentioned it. What if you turn that around? Because
Yeah.
here in Europe, some folks, well, not everybody, but some folks in Europe, when they read something like that, they're going to frown and say, "What the heck?" But if you turn around and saying, Drupal Association, we'd like to see where we can help the community and see how we can show the community what kind of work how we approach things and how we can do it, what we can do for you and with you, etc. And you end up, of course, with the same thing, but it sounds a heck of a lot better
Sure. Yeah. I
for
mean, I think
some
that's a
critical
fair.
minds here in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair point,
It's
Yos, and I feel like I think that's a fair point. I feel like we have there's a I think that is the staff's intent, right? Like I think that that's what
I
we
agree.
are attempting to do, and I think there are probably some places where we have to draw some lines in the sand around some of the work
Hmm.
that's already undertaken. Like it's easy to say, "Oh, hey, community, you're doing this work and you need some help with that, and how can we be helpful to you?" And there's something new, and we create it together. I'm going to read between the lines here and I'm going to read between the lines here and say that we're talking about European cons to some context, to some degree in this conversation here, and
Hmm.
say that I think we probably have to go back to the drawing board together because there's a certain amount of we have some history and we have to probably undo a little history, but also at the end of the day, if there's a $1.4 million financial liability, someone's got to take some ownership, right?
Hmm.
And it's a lot harder
Yep.
for us as an organization just to say, like, I mean, I think we want to have the attitude that we're there for the community, but at the end of the day, when you're taking the financial responsibility, you also have to figure out how to take ownership in ways that probably rub up against
I
the
agree.
true meaning of that statement, even if we all try to
Hmm.
feel it in spirit.
I agree, and that's the challenge, of course, right, for you
Yeah.
guys. But just that, the marketing message, the way you say it, sometimes can already make a difference. And
Yeah.
and and some when you say take fiscal control of the cons, that's fine, but some people, I mean, most people are not even worried about the numbers of the DA, and some folks are totally worried, really, like it shows in everything they do.
Hmm.
Um, they're very worried about the content because they don't really, worry and think about that stuff, but the content, what the con is all about,
Hmm.
appears to be a very hot potato for most. And so what they say is, what's the DA have to do with the content of the con? Doing the financials and stuff like that. And of course, I know that these two things are very much connected.
Okay, good.
Right,
I was
it
about to
has to
say
be,
that.
right? Of course.
Yeah.
But the point is that the hardcore techies, they don't look at the con as an organization or an event that costs 1.5 million and stuff like that. They see it as, it's where we talk about the code that we did there and about the feature that we're developing there. They have a totally different viewpoint, and if you can try and keep that viewpoint for the tech community while building the other viewpoint around it of the, let's say, non-tech, the marketing, you can see more and more marketing people going to cons, more in America, but also here in Europe.
Yeah.
So that's something you can. It's the how do you call that? It's plagat. They call it the it's doing one thing and but not. Let me say that. Say the
Saying one
one
thing but
thing, but
doing
you should.
another. Sure.
No, you say the one thing, but you also still are doing the other thing. So
Hmm.
you're trying to do things both ways,
Gotcha.
right? So if you make sure that the technical people remain under control of the technical things of the technical product Drupal, then you've scored major points.
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel like it's
But I see
we
your
have to have
point
a
also.
conversation and figure out, like I said, how to
Yeah.
define some of
Hmm.
these things better to make sure that everyone feels like um,
Hmm. It need
everyone
to be.
feels like they know what to expect. I feel like a lot of what we're up against right now is that there's a lot of uh, a lack of clarity,
Yep.
and just having a conversation will
Hmm.
go a long way. But I appreciate that you recognize our intentions here and are willing to have the conversation, Yost, for sure.
Yep. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. All right, and I hear your point about the language, and I'm definitely working on that. It probably comes from me just personally. I feel like it's been a really challenging 8 months for me as a human being here, because I feel like there is a lot of us versus them mentality, us being the community, them being the DA, and why are we always out to get everyone, you know? And so I
Hmm.
feel a little bit like it's been set up that way, and it's been tough for me to work through that and talk about it. That's probably where my language comes from. Is that it's sort of always been presented that way to me. But I thank you for understanding that's not what I mean, and we'll continue to work on that
Hmm.
language.
Right. That's fine.
Yeah. So let me get back to some of these objectives just to run through them. I don't want to stop and talk through each line item because there's a ton of stuff there. But I think what I want to point out is that again, we can't measure everything, and we're not always certain what the right indicators are for some of these goals. When we say we want to have a well-run organization, we've got some income-related stuff. We did manage to get one employee satisfaction metric in there, but we're not sure that these are the exact right things to measure yet. But we're going to be watching these numbers over this year, and we hope that that will inform what we measure next year and what we are able to what we're able to address after that. So, I think, just think of all of these things as our first take in a very iterative process. And what we're planning to do with these numbers in the coming months is put together a community dashboard. So you'll be able to see all of these numbers as we track them and watch our progress throughout the year. A lot of these numbers will be tracked monthly. Some of these numbers will only be tracked annually, but we'll let you know what those are. And I think that it is, we'll put that out there in a way where you can just sort of always drop in and check out that document. And I think these are not also all the metrics that will get tracked, sum total across the organization. Each department here will also be tracking additional metrics that relate to, sort of their tactical daily work. But we'll put those will probably be more internal as we go along. So we'll track some more things too, like I said, to see if we can find out if these are better, if we can find better indicators towards some of these things. But I did want to stop and see if anyone had looked at these metrics in depth and had any questions about any of the individual metrics. Okay. So fun times with tracking numbers. I actually love it. I'm very excited. And then here are some of the program related goals. We are also in the plan. So what is each team going to be doing? So on the Drupal.org side, this work is really driven by the working groups, the software working group, the content working group, and those other guys, the infrastructure working group, who are, really working right now to put together, well, they already did put together plans for 2014, and now they're working on figuring out how to implement those plans. So you can see some of the work we're planning to do to bolster Drupal.org. It's actually not a new Gennady cluster anymore. It's a new something else cluster, which I'll remember in a minute. But at the time when we wrote the plan, it was Gennady cluster. That's what we're going to go with. But basically more infrastructure that will allow us to provide better test bots, more responsiveness, more servers to increase the site speed. We have lots of staffing changes, which I'll talk about in a minute. Internal security testing and maintenance. We have a lot of software development projects that the software working group are working to define right now. A lot of those will happen around the issue queue, UX issues. We also want to take some time to focus through the content working group on persona development. And Ruby, this just goes to your point that you made in the chat a little while ago. It isn't just Drupal developer geeks and marketing folks who are part of our community, and we really want to understand who's coming to Drupal and Drupal.org and what is it that they're looking for, so that we can build a site that really does represent them. And of course, that research is also really helpful in program development for the cons, et cetera. So we think that's a really good investment to make. And then we still have some cleanup to do from our security audit in the summertime. Events, on the event side, we're going to make some investments in our version of COD / continue to try to align that with the actual versions of COD that are out there, if that's the right thing to do, but that's a long conversation that we keep having. We're going to be adding some new programs to the cons themselves. In particular, we're going to continue to run the community day, or the community is going to continue to run that, but we're going to continue to provide the space for it, as well as the we're going to start a CMS evaluator event. So that event we're going to run alongside the con in Austin. The intent is to bring folks in who are looking at Drupal as a product for their company, help them understand what Drupal's all about and what the benefits are. It'll run alongside the con at first, just because we have lots of infrastructure there, but we feel like long term this is something that we can spin out and run separately. We want to sort of provide a little more structured support to camps. We've been talking to a lot of camps about what they need, and we're putting a plan together for how we provide more resources to camps. In particular, the fact that we're opening a branch in London will allow us to provide fiscal sponsorship to camps in the UK and Europe for the first time, the way that we were able to do here in the States. And we really want to formalize global training days and make that a bigger program as well on the event side. And then marketing communications, ADO redesign, not a huge redesign, but not an overall top to bottom redesign, but really the IA and sort of layout of the site so that folks can find stuff. So information architecture, and layout. Drupal 8 launch marketing, and then we're going to work on some Drupal Association branding. That's just important. One of the things we keep bumping into is how the cons relate to the DA and how the DA relates to Drupal, and we're hoping that we can answer some of those questions visually through some branding as well. And then HR and finances, lots of processes that we have to document. We've been really focused this year on what is the work that we do and what does it take to get that work done. And so now that I feel like staff really have a sense of what it is that they do, we need to sort of document some of those things so that other people can have clarity into how work happens. We're definitely going to have to create a good onboarding program because we're planning to hire quite a bit. And we've been, working on benefits and work-life balance. And I think one big thing for the community is creating a new set of financial reports. So you may have noticed I've been putting out some of the sort of standard monthly financials for folks to be able to look at. We want to create a new set of quarterly financial reports that really show what the work is that we're doing from a financial perspective. Sales and support. I'm going to bolster up sponsorship fulfillment in particular and customer service for sponsors. And then we get to the fun staffing side. And so when you're looking through the staffing section, one thing I want to point out to you is that a couple of things. One is I think everyone on the call is aware that we're looking at a large deficit spend for 2014. So one thing in particular that we want to keep in mind is that the driver of that deficit spend is staffing. And so if we've tiered the starts for all of these roles, both because we just can't take on 12 hires in January, couldn't even make 12 hires by January, but B, and primarily because what we wanted to do was get sort of some of the most important folks on board first, and then as we go through the year, we can check in on our financial performance and basically, play a go, no go game at that point. So if we're not meeting revenue, we can look at, what hires we have coming up and say, okay, maybe we can't take that hire on. But what we're not going to do is put the association or the project at, more risk by taking on more staffing burden if the revenue isn't going as we had anticipated for the year. So just want to point that out, that we've staggered things that way. And the other thing that I think is not necessarily explicit in here, but this is what we think that hiring needs to look like. And of course, the bulk of the hires are happening on the Drupal.org side: a junior developer, DevOps. Oops, it's time for something. Junior developer, DevOps, QA engineer, web infrastructure manager, all these things. This, particularly around the tech hires, we're looking for a CTO at the moment, and depending on that person's strengths and how they, their experience building these teams, they may see something different. So we might not hire these exact titles, at this exact time frame. So in terms of accountability, I don't want you guys to look at this part of the plan and say, well, you guys were supposed to hire a web infrastructure manager in April. This part may change, right? The important stuff is, what did we say we were going to do this year? Are we getting that done? Give us the flexibility to build the team the way we think we need to meet those goals. So this was, mine and the board and the tech staff that we do have, our best take on how to get there right now. But we think that'll shift, when we have a CTO in place pretty significantly. So that's the hiring part. So any questions about those program plans or the hiring?
You're looking at community internal people. I mean, of course, there's a bunch of CTOs out there who are very, very familiar with Drupal, the whole environment and everything. But then again, you might also have an advantage if you take someone who's not so much Drupal. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
where do you look? Where do you go for your hires?
Yeah, I mean, I think our dream is definitely to have someone from within the community for all of these tech roles. Folks who are deeply invested in Drupal and its success. To your point, Yost, we also need to hire folks who are open-minded and can look at other communities and other ways of doing things, so that we're not necessarily stuck to the way that Drupal's always done it, right? Because clearly it's awesome, but it also has had some shortcomings.
I agree, yeah, especially with regards to marketing and the whole communications and stuff, and yeah, very good.
Yep. Other questions about that? Okay, so that's the leadership plan. And then the other piece to look at here is the budget. And so I want to talk folks through what's in the budget here. So I will tell you the budget narrative. But the way that we organize the presentation here, we've got a few tabs in the budget down across the bottom: a budget by class, 2014 versus 2013, a cash flow projection, and then accrued expenses. I'll explain that in a minute. So 2014 budget by class. So let's just start by telling you that we operate on a accrual basis for our budget. And the way that we are presenting it here is broken down by basically business line. So we've got a few lines of business within the organization: the 2 Drupal cons, which you can see in column C and D, Drupal.org, column F. This year, we're going to have a product marketing line, and that's for the Drupal 8 release primarily. I don't know that we'll have this one every year, but it definitely is relevant for 2014. We have an other programs business line. This is for things like global training days and camp support, that sort of thing. And it's just sort of a catch-all for other things. And then we have a fundraising product line that is primarily there because we are a 501c3 organization in the U.S. that is a tax status. It means we're a nonprofit organization, and one of the things that we need to report on in audits is how much have we spent on fundraising, and so we're going to keep track of that here with the fundraising column. And then general. So this general is like what you might think of as overhead, right? This is the rent, the internet access, all that kind of stuff. So we've broken it out by class. And I think we're also going to be reporting financials this way for you throughout the year so that you can actually get some insight into how the DA money is getting spent specifically. Right now, all you can see is the general, like the total bucket. What did we spend in February on everything, all sum, right? And this will now sort of give us a sense of how Drupal.org scales compared to other programs, et cetera. So that's why we presented it this way. And we've got income and then expenses and the total net revenue down at the bottom, and then the margin, which is helpful for us, particularly looking at revenue programs, at how much effort we have to put in for the return we get on the money. And of course, we're investing a lot in things that don't generate revenue, particularly Drupal.org. So we expect that'll always have a negative margin, and that's a little bit different than how most businesses might think of margin and presenting that. But the key point for me when I look at this here is that we're really looking at investing at Drupal.org in a significant way in 2014, and so this goes back to those imperatives. We are in 2013. It'd be kind of tough for me to actually tell you what we spent on Drupal.org because we haven't been classing out the income and expenses that way this year. But in 2014, I can guarantee you it's not $1.4 million. Let's just put it that way. It's a lot less. So in 2014, we're really bumping that up. And you can see that, our spend on Drupal.org matches now the cons. And so this to me is a really significant shift because when I came on board, basically everything here was really aligned around the cons and making the cons work. And the thing, like we heard very clearly, was, more of Drupal.org, please. And so we've been really focused on aligning resources that way. And I'm really pleased to be able to do that this year. And I think the other big message, which we've already talked about a little bit, is that obviously the bottom right-hand number on the budget is a big negative for 2014. So we are asking the board to spend $750,000 of reserves, which is a lot of money, for sure. But we do have it in the bank. And where you can track that is on the cash flow projection tab. So to give you a sense, right now we're estimating that we'll start 2014, and you can see this in cell C1. We'll start 2014 with $1,350,000 roughly in the bank. Could be a little more, could be a little less, but that was our estimate in October when we put this together for the board to approve. So that's where we think we're going to start. And then what we did was we took the income and expense for the year that is in our budget, and we played it out across all of the months. And if you then scroll over and look down at the bottom, if you look at cell N107, all that expense for the year, we predict will put us at a cash position of roughly $600,000 at the end of 2014. So it's not like we're spending down to zero, but we are spending down to, about 1 month's reserves, which is pretty, I think the general rule of thumb that gets thrown around a lot is, to have 3 months, at least 3 to 6 months of reserves on hand. So we're spending down our reserves in 2014. But you can see we still have cash in the bank, and nobody should worry about the future of the organization at that point. But it is a situation. And so by the end of 2014, we need to see that we are hitting revenue in a way that we think we can meet our 2015 and 16 projections, which allow us to continue to build staff, but much more slowly, right? Not as aggressively as this year. So adding a few positions a year over the next couple of years in 15 and 16. If we can do that and the revenue is looking good, we expect that in 2015 we'll be basically revenue neutral. So we won't be building this reserve in 15, but we also won't be running a deficit, and that by 2016 we'd be able to start contributing back to our reserve. But those numbers are super preliminary, and so we don't feel comfortable sharing them with the community yet because I don't want to put something out that you guys hang on to and say, you said it was going to go like that. And we're still working on all our financial modeling because we haven't had a ton of great data for a number of reasons to model this sort of thing out. So that was a lot of words. One other spreadsheet I'll point out, and then I'll stop again for questions, is just the 2014 budget versus the 2013 projections. This doc is basically just meant to show you where are we growing or contracting across our various accounts for between what we're budgeting and what we're likely to spend in 2013. It just gives us a sense of sort of year over year, what are things looking like. And so when you look at this, where there are big numbers like, utilities is going to go up 2,043%. You can see it's actually not a ton of dollars difference. But let me find a good better example then. I need a bigger one. Give me a second. Okay, so here's a good one. So account 6,400 legal and professional fees. It's going to go down 89% from like 40,000 to roughly 4,000 in the budget. What you'll find in the budget narrative is an explanation of that difference. Why is it going to drop 90%? The answer is because we're recategorizing some expenses. We didn't have the right accounts last year for all the stuff that we do, but at any rate, when you look at those differences, the explanation, you can find those in the budget narrative for those big differences. So that's how the budget looks and how to take a look at sort of what we're expecting there. Any questions about the numbers there or the presentation or how to read it?
I like the clarity and the way that it can be read. Questions about there are no rules or so that would prevent you from basically, running a fairly exciting show in 2014, going down to about 1 month of a reserve. Is that okay for the type of organization you are, or that the DA, the board, says, okay, we'll go for that, or is that just planned?
So there aren't any rules governing that, right? I mean, we could spend down to our very last penny if we wanted to. We could even go into debt if we wanted to. There are no rules from a legal perspective, from like the Internal Revenue Service or whatever, in terms of how we manage our finances. So we're not. So there are no rules around that. And there are also no rules around how much reserves you need to carry in the bank. You can carry 2 years of reserves if you want, but you can carry 1 week's of reserves if you want. That's entirely up to you and how the board wants to manage the organization. So we don't have to worry anything. There's nothing legal preventing us from running the budget this way. That said, if it is definitely a risk. It is just one that the board feels like we need to take right now, because the community concern over Drupal.org is so high, and we just went through a period of almost 2 full years getting that Drupal 7 upgrade done, that we really need to figure out how to increase the velocity of change that we're able to make on that site, and to do it in a positive way. And we're not going to be able to do that without investing significant resources in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's a risk, but it's a calculated risk. And I tried to emphasize in the staffing portion of it, like we know where we need to be at any given point in time. And so if we're not hitting those numbers, we won't then also add the additional expense.
Mm-hmm.
What are those thresholds, and how are you going to communicate to the community that you're staying within them as this progresses?
Yeah. So what we do right now in terms of financials in the board, so we have a finance committee that reviews the financials on a monthly basis. And then once a quarter, the finance committee presents those to the board approves them, and then I'm able to publish them out to the community. So I do that on the DA blog, the association blog. And I just got, we had been doing it monthly for a bit, but we got our process settled within the board. So just, I think last month, I got a post up with a full quarter's worth of financials there. So we'll continue that. We'll continue to publish those quarterly. And what we're going to give you is some variation on this. So you can see actuals versus what the budget was supposed to say. So that is, we're going to essentially going to have to design a new report that shows you, basically exposes what we said we were going to do and where we're actually at. So it'll be some variation of this. One thing I want to point out in particular, though, if you look at the, so this view of the budget here shows it by class. If you look at the cash flow projection, you can basically see what does the budget look like on a monthly basis. And so sometimes when you look at budget items, they are like all over the map, like in particular the con expenses, like we know sort of what the ebb and flow of con expenses looks like. So you can see that we know in April we're going to have to pay this expense for the Austin con, et cetera, right? A lot of numbers, though, you can see they're just spread out evenly across the year. So legal and professional fees, IT, we just have $39.50 in the budget every month for a year. And we might not spend that money at all in January, February, or March, and then hit a situation, not hit a situation, but the projects that we have scoped out right now, they may all hit in May, and we spend a bunch of that money in May. So the reason that they're spread evenly out in a lot of circumstances right now is because we're not sure when those things are going to hit. And so we're trying to take a conservative approach, which in budgeting, you just spread it out evenly. So one thing I just want to communicate to folks is that I don't think it'll look exactly like this. And in fact, I don't think that, I can't tell you that I am 100%, I feel 100% positive that we're going to hit, negative $750,000 on the dot, right? I think that there will be some degree of variance. I'm going to do my best to manage this budget so the variance only happens in a positive direction. But like I said, we haven't had a ton of history with a lot of these expenses, and a lot of our financial data isn't structured in a way that can give us the insight at this point to feel with a high degree of confidence that we could manage the budget to plus or minus 3%, for example, which is, a standard I'd like to be held to at some point, but I would not feel comfortable saying that this year. I said a lot of words. Did I actually answer your question? I take that as a yes.
That is a yes.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Excellent. We just came to the top of the hour, but I can stay on for a bit longer if folks have other questions or things they want to talk about.
I think this was well organized. Thank you very much.
Happy to do it.
I also think this is, I see it to work. It's a very big step, and it's going in the right direction. Definitely, I like that. That's good, and I'll chat that around to the other folks here in Europe, if I may.
Thanks. Well, of course.
Yeah, I'll also try to mediate, as I always do, which turns out to be my middle name, so that's fine. And trying to make sure that things don't boil over. But Holly, whenever you have some time, just chat me up, and we'll talk a little bit more about the psychology of the European situation, sort of. I mean,
yeah.
If you give me some feedback on that, it'd be very interesting to find your vision on that. So
I would love to do that. I would definitely love to do that, Yo. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, then I'll because I'm in touch with most of the folks, and it's all informal, of course, and it's you don't want to get the wrong kind of rumor going around, right? So
yep.
We'll try to make sure that it goes in the right direction.
Yeah, and so I just encourage, folks who are, if you hear folks who have other questions or whatever, definitely, please encourage them to come have the conversation with us, either through, comments on the blog post, or, you can find me on Skype or at IRC, and, wherever. I am totally happy, email, I'm totally happy to answer questions, and it's been very, the reason I appreciate them the most is because it's really easy to get myopic when you're building a budget in particular, and there's so many details, and so you end up taking a lot of it for granted, and it's hard to remember what needs to get said out loud, or what assumptions you had that maybe not everyone else is on board with. And so, it's helpful for me to hear the questions so that we can get better at, answering them preemptively,
Mm-hmm.
Good, and I just want to acknowledge Ruby's comment too. I think so Ruby said, hopefully the focus on Drupal.org is in service of supporting and engaging a broader and more diverse community of users and builders. And yeah, that's definitely the intent. And I think we'll see, our first focus is definitely going to be on some of the developer tools, because there's a lot of pain there. And what we don't want to end up happening is slowing down the velocity of the Drupal 8 release in particular, because people are waiting for 47 minutes for a test bot to do its job. So we're gonna have to focus there first, but we are really interested in better understanding the audiences and delivering better content and tools for that full range of Drupal user, not just the developers. But I think that will take a little while to see that manifest itself.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Anything else, you guys?
Not for me, not at the moment.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much. It really is pretty amazing that people will show up to talk about your budget with you. And yeah, if you need anything else, let me know. And I'm happy to answer any questions. But yeah, thanks again. And I'll put the recording up too, so you can share that as well with folks.
Sure, okay,
Awesome.
great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.